Hi Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Rod. I'm okay, and I must apologise for my tardiness as I've had internet issues in my house. So apologies for me that we're starting slightly late, but we're here, we're recording, we're talking. It's episode 116, and it's the 15th of April.
It certainly is. Should we fire straight in and do some follow-up?
Yeah, let's do it. So what have we got up? So we've had an emulator on the App Store. Dum, dum,
Yes,
dum.
we talked about this last week. It looked like Apple was going to give permission for emulators to appear on the App Store, and the first emulator hit, and it's called, and I'll try and get the link right, it's called GBA and GBC Retro Emulator, iGBA, and it was there, and much celebration there was that you could get an emulator on the App Store, and then very quickly it went. Oh, Chris has it on his phone. I can see Spottress falling there.
Yeah, so I did download this. I thought, oh, I'll go and have a look. I'm not a big emulator person, so I don't know lots about it, but I was curious. And I thought I'd have a look. And so you basically install this emulator, and it's not a great experience because you end up installing an emulator and there's nothing there. But it links you out to a open source website where you can download the ROMs. And so I had to go and I installed a ROM, and it was quite cool. And I thought, this is neat, this is great. Like, this is the new Apple. They're allowing emulators. And I tried it out. Have you tried this?
I don't have an iPhone at the moment, so I have not.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. The whole of last week's show.
The whole of last week's show. We might talk about that a little bit later. It is follow-up, but it's more serious follow-up than this. So that's interesting. So you downloaded it, you got it to work, all was well.
All was well. It seems all right. It's a bit slow. There's some adverts which are annoying. It is, like I say, an odd first run because there's no like obvious place to go, and you have to click the search, which basically takes you to a website. You download the file. I can't remember what the extension was, and then you have to then go to the share sheet and open that in the emulator app, and then it imports it in, and you can play it. So it was kind of cool. I've just downloaded Tetris because I thought I'd go with something I know. I don't know a lot of Game Boy Advance games, if I'm honest, so that's what I've done. And I'm glad I did it, because if I'd have waited another 48 hours, Apple's taken this emulator away from me.
They would have taken this emulator away from you, and the reason isn't because it was a copyright violation or anything. It's the developer of the app, the actual app, complained. And the actual developer of the app we've talked about a few times in this show, is Riley Testit, who is the guy who started launching the alternative app marketplace. And this was his high school emulator that he wrote for the Game Boy and had released open source somewhere. And somebody had just pinched it, put a little bit of LLM-based stuff on the front of it, and released it to the App Store.
It's amazing, though, that App Review, again, has let something through that they shouldn't have let through. And I don't know, I just find the whole thing, it's Apple all over, isn't it? But interestingly, that a clone is the one thing that got through the App Store, and actually somebody hasn't released a proper one. It's a shame this Riley, I know he does the alt store, but he could release his original one now, charge me £5 or insert number here.
Oh, could he though? Because now he's got an app marketplace, is he allowed to be a developer on the App Store?
Oh, surely you can have two accounts.
I don't know that you can. Do you not remember us talking about all this at the start? Because the DMA, Apple said they weren't going to allow this, and then we were a bit unsure. I mean, a cynical person would say, oh, hold off, here's an app marketplace. Oh, and we're going to let these things in now. Just to make it look like, we are accepting of all these things, and we are being compliant with the DMA. And is this just more examples of Apple's malicious compliance? You would have thought, as you said a minute ago, they'd be a little more careful about the first app they let in with this. Oh, this is a big change. We're going to let emulators in. Oh, the first one we let in is a horrendous knockoff of something else. And I've linked to Riley's Mastodon to it about all this and how he's a bit cheesed off. He's not even all that cheesed off about the developer, because he did open source it. He's annoyed that Apple took the time to change the App Store rules to allow emulators and then approved a knockoff of my own app, even though I've been ready to launch Alt Store with Delta since March the 5th.
Yeah, you can imagine why he's frustrated.
It is frustrating. This is the guy that testified in front of the court that went to that Apple panel, not testified, but went to that Apple panel when they were talking about the app marketplaces. So, what one to pick, Apple. Good job. Fantastic example. I think there'll be some fallout about this.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see where it goes. I am gutted, though, because it would be good to have a couple of emulators to play with.
Yeah, I think I can just visit the Play Store and download as many as I'd like to shake my fist at, frankly.
Yeah, you are in a different world to me.
I am a little bit. So that was the game, the first emulator, and presumably there'll be more if they can get this right. Next story and follow up, and you and I have both bemoaned Apple selling laptops with only 8 gigs of RAM. We don't think it's enough in this day and age. Apple has come out in a story in 95 Mac this week arguing that 8 gigabytes of RAM is fine if you're only going to do a little bit of light web browsing. And again, my response to this is no, it won't. You know, if you were spending immediately $1,000 on a laptop, you're going to keep it for at least 3 years. You're probably going to keep it for 5 years. You're going to hand it down to someone in your family. And the way requirements have gone up for web browsers and absolutely everything else, 8 gigabytes is not enough. And it's ridiculous Apple are continuing to come out and try and tell you that this is an okay thing, because it's really not.
And we've kind of been at 8 gig, I'm going to say 10 years, but for an arbitrary, reasonable amount of time, it does feel like it needs to move up. It just seems to have plateaued massively. I think 8 gig can work, but I think it is measly. Even if they just went to 12, it's a bit like that when you get your iCloud account and you just get the 5 gigabytes that you had 10 years ago. That's not slowly just increased with inflation, as it were.
And here's the thing. What are Apple going to push come the M4? AI and LLMs and all that kind of stuff. And they're going to push on device rather than cloud. 8 gigabytes is not going to be enough.
No, I think we should be at 16 by now. When I bought my M1 Mac laptop, my M1 Max even, I wanted to go to 32. I probably don't need it half the time, but I wanted to have some future proof, because if I do keep it for 5 years, which is what I didn't buy it to keep it that long, but I planned to keep it longer than probably 2 or 3 that I normally would. So you want something like that. It's so frustrating that their standard box configurations, you can't even easily get a 16 gigabyte model that you can give people the link to, because they don't seem to do standard configs that are the slightly better spec. You know, they're usually a bigger hard drive, but you kind of want one that's got the RAM in it too. I still think it's bonkers, and they should definitely have 16 gig of RAM in at this point. It's too late as usual, but Apple's famously done this for a long time. We used to bemoan when it was 4 gig and they wouldn't go to 8.
Yeah, and they still haven't increased their iCloud storage in the same period of time. As you say, that's been 5 gigs since the start, which is even more ridiculous, frankly. But, you know, I guess cloud storage costs what it costs, but we know how cheap memory is. We know how cheap SSD space is, and it's absolutely nickel and diming. And to get to a decent spec laptop, by the time you add, I think it's 200 quid to go from 8 gigs to 16 gig, it's another 200 quid to go from 256 to 512, which is the bare minimum you want in a hard disk, by the way. You can't plug in something all the time, particularly to a MacBook Air. You start going, well, I may as well buy a MacBook Pro, and a MacBook Pro with that sort of specs, about 2,099 quid, something like that. That's a big gulf between 999 and 2099.
Yeah, which is where I ended up when I was looking. I was fleeting on which one to buy, and I was like, well, actually, there's not. You get to a point where there's not much between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro in price. You might as well get the Pro because you get the better screen. It is a nicer kit. It is heavier though. I do like the MacBook lightness, I guess, the MacBook Air lightness.
Definitely, but some people just don't have another £1,000 to drop on a laptop.
Yeah, I'm in a fortunate position, and I've set up my tech.
Fair. Moving on, and just sort of backing up some of the things we've been saying. Well, not backing it up, but a perspective on that would agree with us. Jason Snell, of whom we like very much, on his blog Six Colours, Dan Moren is a co-writer there. Dan Moren has written this piece about how regulation is actually forcing Apple to do the things we want them to do. You know, to have USB-C connectors in the phones, to open up to things like emulators and all the rest of it. And it's a really good piece, and I think it's worth reading by Dan. Yeah, regulation can actually make big tech behemoths, you can call them to task over these things, and it's ridiculous that it's got to come to that. They should just be trying to do the right thing. They should just trying to be competing fairly with other people in the market. But regulation works.
I don't disagree. I must confess, actually, follow up on the iPhone 15 Pro. Quite enjoying having USB-C on it. I've got one cable to charge my iPad, my phone. With my recent camera we discussed last week, I've just got one USB-C to USB-C cable, and I can offload my photos from my camera straight onto my phone into my iCloud. It is quite nice. And I only take one cable with me now. I've got one charger, one cable in my kind of go-to, and I know I can charge all my devices one at a time, but it keeps it nice and light in the bag. So I'm very happy with that situation.
Yeah, and if you want to change your phone, you don't need to change your cable. You know,
yeah, that
even
is cool.
to another whole which is really cool. That's the way it should be. These things should just be able to swap amongst each other, and you can.
Yeah, no, it is good, but again, it took regulation to get us there.
It took regulation to get us there.
Title.
Next story. Yeah, you better make a note of that. We keep coming back to 5.25 inch floppy disks. We had a story about Boeing still using them to update 747s. Well, in shocking news, San Francisco Transit also is going to keep needing floppy disks until at least 2030. Wow!
That is insane, isn't it?
Yeah, we're talking San Francisco. So that is the city down from Silicon Valley where all these tech companies are, who moved on from the floppy disk when your Dells and your Apples and your Microsofts and Facebook and Google and everybody, I don't think any Google computers ever had a floppy disk anywhere near them probably, but wow.
It's bonkers, isn't it? Because when did we last use a floppy disk? Some time ago, and yet your airline plane needs a floppy disk drive. It's just insane.
So, I mean, in the story, members of the San Francisco Municipal Transit Authority, which is responsible for light rail within that area, spoke to Bay Area News and have detailed the agency's use of 3 5.25 inch floppy disks every morning. The floppies have been part of Muni Metro's automatic train control system since its installation in 1998. 1988. No, 1998. Yeah, can't read. Wow.
Wow. That's what you call tech debt. That's proper tech debt, isn't it?
It really is. Anyway, I quite like that. Follow floppy disk news. Maybe be a section just for that.
Floppy discorder.
Yeah, well, there you go. Moving on, and very quickly, again, we spoke last week about Tesla trying to get Apple involved with the case of a family that was suing Tesla for being on his phone when he should have been driving the car. Tesla has settled out of court. That immediately implies guilt to me. If you settle out of court, is you think this court case is going to go badly, or maybe they just want it to go away. You can't say that, I suppose, but it's not great that they're just settling out of court. Or maybe it is. It's probably better for the family than dragging them through that. But it implies a certain acceptance that they were to blame for this.
Yeah, it's never a good look, is it? Can this just go away quietly and we spend a little bit of money? Thank you very much. So maybe other stuff was going to come out. And I guess if Apple weren't going to play ball, which they probably shouldn't because they wouldn't do that on any other court case. So, yeah, it doesn't look good.
Fair. You've got some HomeKit updates for us.
Yes, I don't know if you remember, for Christmas I bought my in-laws a Matter socket, and I thought, great, they can have a Matter socket, we'll put it in their house, and they can turn their lights on and off when they're not there, and get them into HomeKit a little bit. But Matter doesn't work if you haven't got a Home Hub, which they don't have Apple TVs, they don't have HomePods, and so I was a bit annoyed that it didn't work. And I thought, you know what, I'll take the plugs back and then I'll swap them out for an old HomeKit one. I wonder whether that will work. And I was a bit 50-50. But you know what? 100% does. So if you do want people in your house, in your wider family or friends that don't have Apple TVs or HomePods or any other form of Home Hub to have lights they can turn on and off remotely, use the old HomeKit ones. So that's what I've done. I just thought that was like a public service announcement.
I would say that they wouldn't work if you did have a Home Hub, because I never got my Matter devices to work with several Home Hubs. So, your mileage may vary on that. And then for the HomeKit without Matter devices, is there an iPad in the house?
No, I don't think there is.
No?
But it just worked with the iPhones and stuff in the house.
Well, that's good. Because it used to be that you had to have something that would serve as a Home Hub, and the iPad was originally one of the first devices before they had other things that could. So, no, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was good, and I thought win. I just because I felt bad. I bought them something that didn't work. So there you go. That was my brief follow up.
Very good. And Audio Hijack.
Oh, Audio Hijack. So Audio Hijack's come out with a new version. I think a couple of weeks ago. If you update to it, you can then reboot your Mac into recovery mode, go into options, go into startup security, and put it back to full security rather than limited, where you allow trusted developers to run a daemon, in essence, I guess, to record audio, because in the newer versions of macOS Sonoma, it now allows you to do it as a permission within settings without having to reduce your security. So I've rebooted my Mac today. I've done that change and gone back to full security. It all seems to work. Other than I was worried when we started recording that I'd broken something a bit more fundamental. But it's great they've done that, and you can now do it in the right way. And it's obviously a much better, less scary experience for anybody wanting Audio Hijack that doesn't want to reduce the security on their startup drive. So it's great. Apple have made the change. Rogue Amoeba, the people that make Audio Hijack, have made the change. it all seems to work. And so I would recommend people move to that setting, especially if you've got a laptop you're using rather than a desktop that you're more likely to have stolen or could leave lying around.
Fair play. I have not made this change back yet, and if your audio comes out spotty this week, then we'll know who to point the finger of blame at. We should maybe have tried a little recording before you disclosed that to me, but that's fine. I'm sure everything will be great.
Everything looks like it's recording, so I think we're good, but you can blame me. But I wanted to try it, though, and I'll be honest, I couldn't remember the settings that I had to change, so it was interesting to go back into recovery mode, and because you have to push the power button on your Mac for so long and then it boots up into it. It's just been a long time since I've gone there, but I just wanted to see if it worked.
I think we're going to have to, if you ever need a gamer tag again, it's got to be beta love or just try if it'll work, for sure.
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit more blasé than some, maybe.
You're a bit more gung-ho about that. Anything else in follow-up?
No, I don't think so.
Let's fire along and do some news then. So this story popped up at the weekend. I was lying on the couch, I was watching some media, which we'll come to in the next section, obviously. I didn't get this alert, but apparently people in up to 92 nations got an alert. We're getting continuous alerts from Apple about potential mercenary spyware attacks, which are a legacy of the Pegasus spyware that we talked about on this podcast before. But that is not what you want to wake up to. An official alert from Apple telling you there's a spyware attack ongoing on Apple devices. That's not great.
It's not a good look. I'd love to know how many people they actually sent a message to, because it's 92 nations, but how many people did that involve? Was it thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, a million?
Or 10.
Or 10 million. I mean, yeah, they've got a big user base, to be fair.
Yeah, they do. But this was people that had Pegasus spyware installed were likely to be MPs, people of import, ambassadors, country leaders, people like that. The attack is likely targeting you specifically because of who you are or what you do. So, 92 countries though to get the warning. How endemic was installing the Pegasus spyware in the background on phones? That seems huge.
It must be the security government software of choice at a point in time. But the text said, Apple detected that you are being targeted by a mercenary spyware attack that is trying to remotely compromise the iPhone associated with your Apple ID, and obviously insert Apple ID here. It's interesting though that they've gone with that, because obviously the iPhones are largely sold on the premise that with all the sandboxing and what have you, that you these things wouldn't really work. So it feels like Apple's kind of saying that remote attacks can happen and sandboxing doesn't solve all our problems.
The thing is, if you've had a government-issued device and the issue with the phone and the people who want to spy on you are your own government, you're kind of caught in the middle of that, aren't you?
Surely they just need everybody's WhatsApp credentials.
Well, then you forget what they are and it goes away. But that's the point of the Pegasus spyware, is it sat in the middle. It was effectively a man-in-the-middle attack, wasn't it? So, I mean, good. Well done, Apple, for alerting people. But how many people were panicked by receiving that particular alert? And what do you do about it? I mean, do you immediately run to your Apple store and say, give me a fresh new iPhone, please? I've got a year of Pegasus spyware. I don't think they're going to refund you because of that.
Or do people think it was fake? Because we had the one recently, didn't we, where it was forcing your Apple ID forgotten password, which was, a fake scam in essence. So it's hard, isn't it? Because people do question when legitimate notifications come out now, because people, I think, are so cautious, or certainly a lot more cautious than they used to be. So when actually a legitimate one comes out, it can be like the boy who cried wolf.
Absolutely. But a scary one anyway, so I'm sure the people involved in that were deeply concerned about receiving a thing from the device manufacturer.
Yeah, it's not good, is it?
No. Moving on, speaking about the device manufacturer, or at least the operating system manufacturer, Microsoft has apparently started testing ads to appear in your Windows 11 Start menu. Are you excited about this as a Windows user?
I hate this as much as I hate the ads in that new Outlook that we discussed the other week, because they make the ads look like the email in Outlook, and they make the ads look like a normal installed app in this Windows 11 Start menu. So it's just a dirty way, in my view, of getting misclicks. Oh look, I've got, and there's the screen grab in the link shows one password. Oh look, I've got a password manager. I'll click on that. But it's not yours. It's an advert for you to buy the password manager. I think this is horrible and slimy, and I think it's done in a way to make you click through not knowing that it's an advert, and they've done the same in Outlook.
It's an absolutely scummy move.
Yep.
The operating system that you have bought on the hardware that you own or at least your company owns. Although in that case, you probably don't get it because the enterprise editions of Windows won't have this kind of stuff built into it, I would assume. They're watching your keystrokes, they're giving you adverts, they're making you switch to Microsoft Edge. This isn't the nice, gentle, improved Microsoft that we thought it was, really, is it? This is the same company, but wearing a different suit.
It's horrible. It's just, it's not good, is it? Why are they doing this?
No, I mean, it's interesting as somebody on the trying an alternate device train at the moment, as I see stuff like this, and I think, I've got a Windows machine for gaming. I don't really need the Windows machine for gaming because I can use my Steam Deck or I can use the PlayStation or something like that. That's a luxury. But then people can't. And we talked about that story with Schleswig-Holstein. I think that's right. The German state trying to move to completely open source things. And you think, is there a world in which you should maybe be trying to use all open source software for a month just to see how that would go? Can you replace a lot of the? I know you can't for your corporate environment, but for work, for home life, if what you need is a browser, access to Steam, what's on there, the ability to write something in LibreOffice or something like that. I bet these days you could probably, easily, with fairly pain-free, swap out of at least 80% of what it is you do, and not be targeted by this, and be using open source software, and have the higher security and sort of better feelings that comes along with that. It's a bit of a thought.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. That is a fair point.
Yeah. Anyway, not good, Microsoft. Please cease and desist this scummy behaviour.
Yeah, it's not a good look, is it?
No. And speaking of better behaviour, maybe, that's what we've already talked about, has been enforced on the company by the European Union in this case. A little report from Michael Tsai on the effects of the DMI browser choice. So this is for users in the EU of iPhones. When they rebooted with the newer version of 17.4 on their phones, they got offered a browser choice screen, like Microsoft used to do when it was forced to do so in its antitrust case. And I remember very clearly firing up Windows the first time and being offered the choice of other alternative browsers. But the sort of be-all and end-all of this is that now smaller web browsers are starting to gain traction with the EU after the DMA Act has made them do this. So data from 6 companies has confirmed that when presented with this choice screen, many EU users will swap out default browsers like Chrome or Safari for more privacy-focused options. This is quite interesting, isn't it?
It's got to be great, though, for the smaller businesses because it's free advertising for them. They are hopefully getting a lot more eyeballs on their adverts and awareness of their existence than they would normally, because normally they'd be fighting on the App Store search or something. And how many people actually go and search for a new web browser? Probably very few.
I guess there's probably a lot of iPhone users immediately search for Chrome because they're sort of engineered into that in the same way, that's why Windows tries to keep you on edge, isn't it?
Yep.
That sounds wrong. Windows tries to keep you on edge, but I guess that is what they're doing.
I think that makes sense.
Maybe that's the title.
Advert. Yeah, Windows keeps you on edge.
Windows keeps you on edge. But I think at the moment these are all still based on Safari fundamentally, unless they've done a lot of re-engineering. They're still going to be using WebKit underneath it all for it. So very soon, though, they'll be required to actually allow browser manufacturers to swap out the Safari roots of it to do whatever. This can only be a good thing, I think, to promote this kind of choice. And we've talked before about how we're worried about Firefox's decreasing market share compared to Chrome's and others because you need those alternative options. So I think this is a positive thing. And again, I think it shows regulation works.
It does show regulation works. No, it is good. And they can use their own browser engine. I think that came in 17.4. I'd imagine many companies haven't had the time to do the engineering, but if they get more eyeballs on their product, maybe that will spur them on to swap out the engine so they don't have to use the Safari one.
Yep. Next story from 9 to 5 Mac. This is a $1 billion developer lawsuit will proceed after Apple's objection was rejected. Objection was rejected. That's quite hard to say. This is a UK case where Apple have been accused of monopolistic control of the market for iPhone apps, allowing the company to charge abusive levels of commissions on app sales. So this is all of a piece, really. This is the DMA, this is the Department of Justice, but this is the beginning of what the UK end of this may look like. Apple's objection was pushed back. I guess it gets to go on, doesn't it? It's yet another lawsuit where they've just been accused of monopolistic control. This could hit them in the wallet as well.
Yeah, definitely. And this is on behalf of over 1,500 app developers. So it's a lot of developers. And I guess there'll be varying scales of size here, but 30% commission could get to a big number.
It could get to a very big number. Apple have argued that at a hearing in January, that developers cannot have a claim in the UK unless they were charged on purchases made through the UK App Store. Apple, you're having your cake and you're eating it. You want to be a big global thing, and then you want to be separate app stores, and then you want the Mac App Store to be separate from. You can't have it all the ways. You've got to be playing fair with everybody, and they're not. They're just trying to play different markets across each other. They're trying to play different platforms across each other, and we accused Microsoft of scummy behavior a couple of stories ago, and this is scummy behavior again. But it's not a surprise given it's the App Store.
It's not a surprise, I think, given Apple's current MO.
No, it's just I find it very disappointing, but not surprising.
Yeah, agreed on that. It is, in recent times, it is not surprising.
No. Do you want to tell us about Kobo and their first color e-readers?
Yeah, I was a little interested in this because I think out of the two of us, I possibly use an e-reader more. I don't know. I don't know how much reading you do, but I like to use mine for note taking. So I would say that is a limiting factor. So I have a Kindle Scribe and I take notes on it. Occasionally I do highlights, but it's it's all monochrome, so it's grey on darker grey, I guess. And I saw this actually, and I think these look kind of cool. It looks a great little e-reader. They've got one with, if you look at the screen grab, it looks like my Kindle Scribe, possibly a little bit smaller, but it's got a pen on it, and you can do highlights, and they're showing the colour. It looks a bit like GoodNotes in a way. Is the kind of the aesthetic I think they're going for. I'm amazed that it's taken this long to get colour onto an e-reader, but for $220, you can get a Kobo Libra Color, which has got all of the features of a regular Kobo, and it's compatible with a stylus, which you can get with it, which is $70. Which it is annoying, I think, with a lot of these devices. The stylus comes on top. You kind of want. Can you just give us a package with it all in, rather than nickel and diming? Remarkable do the same, but it looks fantastic. Like I don't know what, and I'm not enough of a scientist. I don't know how it's taken 20 years to get colour in an e-ink display. If you think since we've had Kindles, and Amazon haven't got anywhere near this that we've seen. So I think this looks kind of cool. What do you think?
I'm with you. I think e-ink has always fascinated me as a technology. In my head, the pixels roll over. They're either white or they're black. I think that's the way it's been described to me that they work. And that's how you get the very small use of power that you get. You get like a small amount of charge to flip the pixels from one to the other. And then you don't need to power the screen anymore, effectively. And that's what gives you the e-ink display. So how do they do this? Do they give you 5 colours? Do they give you 6 colours for when they roll the pixels? I guess it's just an LCD in the way that all these things are. It drops the resolution from 300 points per inch, or pixels per inch, to 150 pixels per inch, so it's not quite as sharp. But I think people like colour, and the ability to... This opens up a world potentially for comic book readers, better markup, like you've said, decent drawings within them, and it is a bit of a game changer for e-ink. I'm with you. 20 years from the Kindle to here is a long time, and it's not Amazon, who sell more of e-ink devices than anybody else, but this is healthy. This is marketplace. This is competition. I'm delighted to see it. I think it's great, and I think the prices are reasonable.
Yeah, $220 is a lot less than I spent on my Kindle Scribe, so I think it is a good price point. They look nice devices. They do look very much like a Kindle. I guess it's like all phones look quite similar for a period of time. It'd be interesting to see how the reviews come in for these. But and I wonder whether Amazon will follow suit, because Amazon haven't announced a follow-up to the Scribe yet. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe this is in the offing. I don't know.
I mean, maybe this is ecosystems in action. Unless you've got a competitor actually who'll push you forward with an innovation in technology, you don't need to change it. You make them a little bit waterproof. You make them a little bit brighter. You maybe give them a backlight that they didn't have to begin with. In a very slow procession, as we see other companies occasionally doing, not jumping to the next technological leap because they've no need to. They can send you a minor upgrade, and the consumers will eventually sort of come along behind you. But if you're pushed and there's enough of a market demand for it, you've got to respond to it. And maybe this is enough. I don't know if Kobo are big enough to really push Amazon, but I think this is a good technological innovation that gives you new features that your device didn't have before. So maybe we won't be surprised, and in 2 months' time we'll be talking about Amazon's full range of colour e-ink displays.
I think you're right. If without competition you don't innovate, you get comfortable and lazy, don't you? So no, this is all but good.
Yep. Moving on to other technological innovations, we talked about Beeper quite a bit on this podcast, actually, as their sort of conduit to messages or iMessage for non-Apple users. Something I'd quite like at the moment, I must say, the ability to keep some of my texts blue. But WordPress.com, which are known as Automatic, I think, with two T's, have bought Beeper. And Beeper, before it had the iMessage integration, was actually a centralized way of bringing lots of chat clients together. So you could have your WhatsApp in there, you could have your Signal in there, you could have your Telegram messages, and maybe your SMS as well on Android and things like that. All in one place, in the same way that Pigeon Messenger used to be back in the day, and there was one on Mac with a little bird logo that I can't remember off the top of my head, that used to do this aggregate messenger thing.
It wasn't Adium, was it?
Adium, I think you might be right. I think it was Adium. It was a great little thing where you could have 5 or 6. You could have MSN. God, I'm dating myself now. You could have AOL. You could have IRC. You could have the Jabber and a couple of those clients doing it. It was great. You could have them all in one place. And this is that, but for phones. So WordPress, who have 2 of these things now, Text.com and another one, have bought this. And this is an interesting corporate move where you're owning the blog space, and maybe you'll be able to be that conduit, because they know they're not going to get messages, they know they're not going to get WhatsApp, but if somebody's on 2 or 3 services and you can get them there, that's quite an interesting move. There's a security thing that you and I might go, hang on, what do you mean I'm giving all my things into one app? We might not have done back in the day, in the Adium days, but I think it's quite an interesting move.
I think it is interesting. I didn't see this coming. Automatic, with 2 T's, have made some or 3 T's, have made some interesting acquisitions. So if you go to Automatic, that's like the group, the parent company, and they've obviously formed off the back of WordPress's popularity. So WordPress was their flagship product. So WordPress.com, they own Text, Tumblr, Day One, Woo, Jetpack, WP, VIP, Pocket Casts. I forgot they bought Pocket Casts because we talked about that recently. Akismet, I don't know how you pronounce that. Longreads, Newspack, Gravatar, and then they also contribute to a whole bunch of stuff as well. But I do like their tagline at the bottom. We don't make software for free, we make it for freedom, which is quite a good tagline, I think. But now they've got a nice stable of products that they've bought that may have gone under, I guess, if they weren't part of a bigger group or had some backing. And they seem to let the products flourish. They seem to like a product, they buy it, and it feels from on the outside that they let that product live on. It does feel with Beeper that and Text will get merged into one product at some point, because there is a lot of overlap there. But I think it's super interesting, and I kind of feel quite happy when you hear that Automatic have purchased something, because it feels like they try and do right by the team and the product. So I think it's good.
Yeah, and if you've got a long-term view, if the Department of Justice and the EU go, no, you will be made to work with all of these services, and there is more standardization, and they have got a healthy number of people using them, 400,000, 500,000, a million, whatever it is, that number's likely to grow, isn't it? And then you become the centre for text-based blogging with WordPress. Maybe you get a decent podcast market share with that, and you create communities from there too. And that is good competition, I think. So fair play. I mean, they seem on the surface, you got to hedge your bets, haven't you? You know, enshittification is a thing, everybody. We've talked about it a lot. But yeah, this seems reasonable, and it's a logical purchase in the stable of things that they've got.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about this one.
Staying in the same vein, we know that the EU is trying to make WhatsApp and Telegram and Signal and all the bigger marketplaces to be able to cross-message between them all. This is the US getting in on the action now, saying that, at least one senator would like to make Zoom and Teams work together securely. And on one level, I think that's okay. You know, they both more or less do the same thing. You've got messaging, you've got video, you've got audio, you've got replacement of desk phones and all the rest of it. Technologically, I'd be curious to see how they'd get that to work. We talked about Microsoft last week and them being willing to cede the power for something like this after they've got the market share. I don't know. What do you think of the story?
I kind of agree with you. I think yeah, they do video, they do text, they're PBX, phone system replacement. I could see that. Same kind of with Google Meet, but sure they've got some proprietary tech in there for how they compress video, how they do things. I have no idea how all that would work, and I'm sure there's feature parity to a point between the two solutions, but I just wonder technical, is that even possible? How that would ever work? And if you were Zoom dialing into a team person's meeting, would you be a second-class citizen?
It's an interesting thought, though, isn't it? Because you and I, these days, push interoperability a lot in the same way that a lot of the big regulators do. And I think in our very first podcast, we talked about the cost of getting out. If you're very heavily Teams-based and you want to get out and go Zoom, you might be knackered for that very reason. And equally the other way around, if you're very heavily Zoom-based, having Teams forced on you may be the last thing you want. So requiring that those things be interoperable reduces that cost of getting out and actually makes it feasible that you're going to have competition in the market. And if you get in at this point, before it gets far too embedded, and some would argue it's already too late, I'm kind of behind this. I think it's a good thing to make these things interoperable. So maybe you stay with Teams because it's got an innovation, green eyebrows or whatever it is you want to put on your avatar, rather than some other feature that's there. And I think that's quite important. That levels the playing field a lot. No, we're choosing Zoom. Yeah, they're a little bit more expensive, but I really like this about them. Or we're choosing Teams. Yeah, they're a little cheaper, but actually it supports our back end for whatever, with the particular encryption standard we've got. It seems fairer to me that the basic things of them work as well, and then maybe you put in a few other bits and pieces that the other one has no interest in.
Yeah, it does make sense. It'll be interesting to see whether this is technically viable. That's probably what I'm more interested in. Can it actually be done? But I agree with everything you've said.
And legislation works. We've discovered you can make it work. Now again, that comes with a whole host of caveats around your weakening encryption. Maybe you're making it easier for people to hack into it, and all the stories that an Apple would say or a Microsoft would say, which are true. It's not impossible that if you weaken encryption, then you're letting bad actors in. But at the same time, standardization is possible. It is possible. Things we plug our phones into every day are standard plug sockets. It's not just MK that makes them; it's other people, as long as you meet the standard. So I think it's harder with software, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And we haven't had any new software standards for a long time. If you think about it, like we've reached a point, like obviously email's a standard, browsing the web is largely a standard, but everything else has kind of been proprietary within that, as we've talked about with messaging apps and Teams and iMessage and what have you.
App stores.
App stores, fair point.
Yeah, interesting anyway. To finish off in the news, we have a little bevy of rumours. You can tell WWDC is sort of around the corner. The first one of these is that Apple's aiming to release its first M4 powered Macs this year, with a focus on AI, so ignoring the 8GB rumour that we've just talked about. I heard a thing that the M4s aren't really M4s, they're just sort of the higher end M3 chips that we haven't seen yet. And they're just getting a branding exercise as much as anything else, to go in line with the AI, and it lets them move on without actually having to do a lot. And I think that's feasible, but we're expecting M4s anyway, right?
Tail end of the year, I'd expect M4s, unless they skip M4s, M3s for the Pro lines and just move straight to M4s. I don't know. It does feel like they're bringing them out quite thick and fast, so it's hard to keep up. But for me, I think I wish they'd do one generation, get it across the whole line, and then move on to the next one. But it doesn't feel like Apple have got any interest in that. I thought Apple moving to its own silicon, as we talked before, would make things simpler. But I don't think it has. It's made it a lot quicker in a way, and there's so many options of cores that you can have, whether it's graphics or CPU cores, when you pick your chip. It is not as straightforward as I thought it was going to be. This is a no-brainer, and they are clearly touting AI a lot. So if they're going to bring out AI capabilities in the new revised OSs that are going to get announced in June and ship September, October time, you'd expect maybe some AI focused chip power to come along September, October as well, unless they're going to get anything out earlier than that. But I doubt it. I think they'll finish the M3 piece and then we'll be on to M4s at the tail end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the speed bump in this is there's been no news in the Mac Studio or Mac Pro what chips they're getting, and that's why people are speculating. They don't need to upgrade every chip in every computer every year, and we've said at length on this podcast that the change from M1 to M3 even isn't a massive leap. And I will say, as somebody who's moved from an M1 MacBook Pro to an M3 MacBook Pro, it's a little bit quicker. And that's about as excited about it as I can get, really. In all meaningful ways, it's not noticeably faster than what I was using before. Now, maybe that's not true at the highest end of the market, but the M1s were so good that everything has felt very incremental since, which is, that A, it shows how amazing the original M1 was, but B, it's slightly worrying, despite the die shrink down to, what are we now, 3 nanometers?
Yes.
We're not seeing all those sort of benefits, increases and things that really what they've managed to do is very successful software transition with all the sort of same limitations and complications and things that came before, while actually losing a little bit on the graphics side of what was capable with AMD GPUs and sort of all the things that are being made there. So they've had to go heavy on smaller GPU counts on the silicon on chip for it to make use of these AI applications. And a rebranding exercise, now AI is the next big thing, it isn't really a surprise. So I mean, I feel slightly confused with everything I just said there, because it's good, but it could be better, or it's not. You know what I mean? It's a confusing story that they're beginning to tell.
I think it will get more straightforward as we see the software, as we see the chips. They will market it, and they obviously want to catch up with Microsoft because I've said it before in this podcast. Every time my kids play against a computer, they call it AI now, and everybody's calling everything AI. And we joked at work, we could just rebrand this thing as, powered by AI, and instantly people out in our organisation would probably pay it more attention because it's using the hot buzzwords that have been marketed to death. So I can see Apple getting on it, and this is typical Apple, not first to the market quite often, but they come in a bit later, and they're only a year behind by Microsoft standards, whereas normally Apple are many years late. Let's think foldable phones here. And then they come in, but they do it in a better way or in a more useful way. So I'm super interested to see what story they're going to tell.
We will see. I mean, I still have a worry about large language models and this AI, air quotes for those of you not watching the video, about the power consumption of that and what that means in the long term. It just means everything gets stuck into our phones. Small things like browser cookies, for example, become large language model independent programs that sit there absolutely watching everything that you do. You get multi-megabyte packages as opposed to kilobyte packages that get put into things, so you can do better tracking, you can do better modeling. What's the end game of that? All it does is increase compute, which is great if you're Apple and you're selling chips, or you're Nvidia and you're selling chips. But the overall impact of that on our day-to-day computing is probably significant and not always for the better. And I don't mean in terms of a societal, you've got a machine watching you thing. I just mean in terms of raw power and expense and compute and time and all those things that we've come to expect about computers, because it's for the benefit of the vendor, and that's not great. And that's probably some sort of post-apocalyptic future I'm painting there. But you can see where I go. It's not a far leap from, actually we can sell this as AI in your browser to make this better because we can serve you better ads, or we can optimize your browsing experience for the sites that you want. But the monitoring around that is problematic.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying. Like I say, I'm super interested to see where Apple goes with this. Certainly being a Copilot user, I haven't found it terribly sticky. I don't often go to it. So I'm super curious to see how Apple do it. And like I said, will it be what I call sticky? I go to it all the time, and I don't forget I've got a magic button. So I think it's good. I'm really looking forward to WWDC, I must say. I'm hoping Apple are going to right some wrongs.
We shall see. Speaking of righting wrongs, do you want to tell us about iPad OS 17.5 and some new display stuff?
iPad OS 17.5 is in beta 1. Weirdly, we haven't seen a follow-up beta. It took a long time to come. We haven't seen a follow-up. There's not really much in it for anybody. But what is potentially in there is reference to 4 new iPad models, which we're all expecting to be a big iPad Pro, a smaller iPad Pro, a big iPad Air, and a smaller iPad Air, which we've talked about before. So roughly around 11 to 12 inches on both the Pro and the Air. And there's obviously references as well. We've also discussed to the new Apple Pencil, which might have a squeeze action on it. Again, we don't know any more than that. But what they're referencing here is the displays. So there's references to the displays, and it's going to be OLED, possibly similar to what we've got in our phones. I think we're micro LED on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and then it's just a regular LCD on the 11-inch. The 11-inch never got to parity with the 12.9-inch. So this will be interesting, and I am interested in the 11-inch one, because if it ships with a display as good as the big one, I don't think I need the big one in my life, and I will probably happily drop down one. So super interested to see this, but hopefully we're going to get some OLED screens, which will be amazing, because I think a lot of people use their iPads for media consumption, so it will be a great media consumption device. I'm then curious to see OLED coming to the MacBook Pros. Will that follow at some point? I don't know. I'm worried about the thickness, because obviously the MacBook's very thin screens. Maybe they need the thick OLED screens to come, and then they can bring back the illuminated logo on the backside of the MacBook Pros, which I do miss. I do think it's a step backwards not having that. But new OLED, I can't wait. I just want these new iPads. Apple, release them so I can spend some money, please.
You avid consumer, you. Yeah, I mean, modern Apple is happy to go a bit thicker on these things, aren't they? Only ever used to get thinner, the laptops, and since Johnny Ives left, we've seen things get a little bit thicker. Phones have got a little thicker. Laptops certainly got a little thicker. Ports came back. So I think they'd be willing to give the sacrifice for enhanced screens or some other functionality with them. I agree with you. I think the big iPad Pro is too big for most people. If you're a designer or something like that, then it makes sense. So you're trying to get that vivid resolution bigger than paper size. That's great, but I think the next one down is probably the right one for most people to be going for. All this stuff with the iPhone and the EU in 17.4, none of that came to the iPad, did it? It's only the iPhone that's been targeted in this, which I also find quite interesting. Surely, as it's a fairly common app store, we know, why is none of that stuff coming to the iPad?
Because the letter of the law deems that they haven't got monopoly in the tablet space, and therefore they don't need to do it. They are following the letter of the law. I don't like any of it. I think they shouldn't have split iOS and iPadOS. Maybe they knew this was coming one day and they could use it to their advantage. Because iOS and iPadOS are basically the same. They've never really split them far enough, for what the name suggested they were going to do.
Yeah.
But they're following the letter of the law.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. I'll bring this back on track and happy rather than my usual bring it down talking about the EU. Apple hardware is always very good, and I'm sure that this will be very good as well with good screens, smaller bezels. If it's a little bit thinner, it's probably thicker. It'll probably be a little bit lighter in some way, maybe. We don't know. And new pencils as well, so I think that's probably all good.
Yeah, like I say, I can't wait. And I'm partly excited by the small one because every time I take the big one off the case and want to sit with it on my lap and read something, it's just all a bit big. And I think the 11-inch one will be the right size. So yeah, I'm super excited by it. And I do want some more performance. I do find mine a little sluggish every now and again, but I can't tell whether that's the OS or because I've got a 2-year-old iPad, but or maybe 3-year-old iPad now because it's been a long time coming.
It has been a long time coming. Last story in the rumour world, and we're back to AI again. Apparently, Apple is trying to develop a generative AI called Ferret UI that's been specifically designed to make sense of app screens. So I guess that's you can ask it to tell you what's going on the display, or you can get it to interpret your commands to go into the display based on voice input or reduced text input or something like that. Not surprising, given everything we've talked about. I don't think we need to go into any great detail, but did this shock you?
No surprises here. I wonder whether it'll be for accessibility as well. I think Apple, they've clearly got something in the AI space, and they know it, and they know that we don't know it, but they're making hints that AI is coming. So they're obviously a bit cocky, I think, because Tim's spoken about it. Their marketing guy mentioned it on the WWDC. I was going to say tweet. I think it was tweet or whatever you call it, post on X. So I think it's super interesting because Apple don't normally give anything away until they announce. So it's interesting they're feeding us. So I wonder whether they've got something that's going to, is going to be revolutionary, like all the Copilot things we saw last year. I hope it does live up to the hype that they've started to create.
Yeah, like you say, Copilot's not sticky. I slightly worry about, in the article, they're talking about how most LLMs are based from websites. So things are in a particular aspect ratio with a certain text. You move to a phone, it's a different aspect ratio. It's harder to understand where the buttons are. Different developers can move things around. Maybe this is only for their own apps. The training of those LLMs is easy when you've got lots of web pages and lots of text. It's harder when you've got a limited number of apps, and then the way people use them is even more limited. We know the devices are limited for RAM and space, so how do you get enough of a training model for the way people use apps to make use of it in this way? So there's a whole bunch of unanswered questions there for me that I hope Apple would address, maybe in State of the Nation rather than in the keynote. But I'm interested to see their take on this, really.
Yeah, I think that's the devil's in the detail. What's the techie take and what's the consumer user take?
Yep. Anything else in news?
No, I don't think so. Again, no new exciting hardware from anybody. I'm watching with bated breath because I think I need some new toys, but there you go.
It's not always about the gadgets. It's sometimes about the software in the court cases.
Fair point. Maybe that should be our tagline.
Moving on, media. So I found a little bit of time to watch some new shows, or at least a couple of new series of things over the weekend. The first one, and you might have seen it because it's on Apple TV, is Steve, in big letters, brackets, Martin, in very small letters. Have you seen Steve Martin documentary?
I've not seen it, but I'm curious to see what you say about it because this has piqued my interest. But then I saw it was 3 episodes. I thought I need to find a bit of time before I start something.
So it's 2 episodes.
I was close.
It's 2 episodes. They're long though. They're both about an hour and 45 minutes. A little history. I absolutely love Steve Martin. I think it's one of the very first live stand-up shows I ever saw. I was a very young boy. I don't know, I must have had a videotape somewhere of one of his stand-up shows, doing The Wild and Crazy Guy and doing King Tut. And if you're not a fan of Steve Martin, this will mean nothing to you. But he was a stand-up. Most people, and I'm saying from your generation onwards, Chris, would know Steve Martin as the movie star. He was in Planes, Trains and Automobiles. He was in Parenthood. He was in a whole string of Hollywood movies as the white-haired comedian. Would appear with John Candy or Martin Short and the Three Amigos and things like that. And he transitioned his career from being a stand-up to being a movie star to actually just stopping everything and walking away. And he's come back to it recently with a Disney Plus show called Only Murders in the Building, which I haven't watched yet, but. So he's had a long career. He's 75 now, which is just amazing. I think it's helped. He always had white hair, and maybe I identify with Steve Martin more than most because I've had white hair quite a lot of my life as well. So that might be part of it too. But he's a very funny, very thoughtful guy. And this is sort of it's a proper warts and all documentary looking at Steve Martin's early life and his father and all the issues around that, onto his movie career, and then as his life is now, sort of post-COVID and starting to perform again and all the rest of it. And if you're at all interested in the craft of stand-up, early American TV for Saturday Night Live and things like that, how it developed and how his comedy was right at a time, sort of hit that wave of late 70s, early 80s, John Belushi, Chevy Chase, a lot of these comedians who are now the elder comedians, but were sort of post-Python in a way, and there's even a Python in the documentary, Eric Idle, and there's a documentary talking about Steve Martin. It's a really interesting look at his life. It's very well done. It's very Apple and glitzy, and there's a lot of time and respect given to Steve Martin for what he's done in his life and how he's been there. And when I say warts and all, he goes through some of his movies that were certainly less of a hit, let's say, and sort of is quite harsh in his own craft of being a writer or being an actor or being a comedian. And I think it's worth a watch, but it's a commitment. These 2 episodes are about an hour and 45 each.
Yeah. I think what you've said is what I was expecting of it. I'm super interested because I know Steve Martin as the actor, less probably of his comedic piece, but I want to know a bit more about him. That's why I quite enjoy these shows, I think. I quite like Steve Martin as well because he's one of these people that never seems to have fallen from grace. He's just loved by everybody, if you know what I mean, and he hasn't had a shady past that's come out in this documentary. So I'm super curious to see it. And he's 78, by the way, for real-time follow-up, not 75. So he's a good age, to be fair. And he's had a very prolific career.
Maybe he was 75 when they finished the documentary.
Yeah, maybe. Well, he could well be. It's amazing how long these things sit on the shelf for. So, but no, I do want to watch it. It's on the list, and your review has probably just made me want to go and watch it.
Yeah, it's time well spent, I'd say. The second thing that I started watching with my daughter over the weekend is a show called Fallout. It's an Amazon Prime show. It's based on a computer game. So there's a computer game called Fallout from a few years ago. There's been a series of episodes from it. It's made by a company called Bethesda. That are well known for the sort of sprawling role-playing type epics. I think Starfield is one of theirs as well that we've talked about in the show, sort of a space-based version of it. Bought by Microsoft recently. It's a good show. It's got Kyle MacLachlan in it. It's got a couple of English actors in it. It's got, Walton Goggins, who, if you've watched Justified, he always plays a really interesting character. He plays a character called the Ghoul in this. It's very good. It's quite compelling. I've never really played the computer games. I'm just aware of them. It's funny. It's well acted. It's got good costumes. My daughter, who is a bit sniffy about post-apocalyptic type stuff, thoroughly enjoyed it. She was going to watch 10 minutes of it with me, and we watched 2 episodes instantly. So yeah, I'd recommend if you want something a bit different, want a bit of humour with your post-apocalyptic take on things, then Fallout's good, and I'm going to continue to watch the rest of it.
You are in the same place as me, I think. I'm aware of the games. I knew Bethesda had them. I know very little else. Again, this is on my radar, I think, to pick up again. It was another TV series, and I was like, I don't want to commit to another TV series at the moment. So maybe I need to get this on the list after I've seen Steve.
Yep, I'd give it a go. Last but not least from me, I know you've managed to watch something this week as well, is Race Across the World. That started last week on BBC One. This time they're going from Japan in Sapporo in Japan to Lombok in Indonesia. Terrific. Really compelling start. Fantastic. Straight out the gate. And just a small anecdote. At the end of watching the first one, my eldest daughter entered me and her for the next series of Race Across the World, which we won't get into because I have travelled before and I get on with my daughter, which isn't what they want from the couples that take part in that. But I was a bit taken aback to have an email from the producers going, "Thank you, we've received your application." So if I vanish towards the end of the year, that's why. But I feel fairly secure in the knowledge that I won't be going to do that.
That would be fantastic. I'd love to do it. I think it's a fantastic show. Do you reckon they'd let me and my 10-year-old son on? Because he would love to do some of this.
I think you probably both need to be 18, so you and your wife could do it.
Leave our children behind. I'd love it if you got on. We watched the show as a family. Oh, it's brilliant. It's just an hour. It's a great TV. It's always well edited. And they go to some amazing places. And it's just really good. And they generally do seem to find good varied couples that work, and whether it's mother and daughter, father and son, friends, brothers, sisters, whatever the pairing may be, they seem to get it right. I think they generally get good people that are a good fit for the show, and it's great. And like I say, it's good family TV.
Yeah, it's a great show. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It does a little bit of the competitive thing, it does a bit of the reality TV thing, it does a bit of a travel thing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and if you want to watch somebody burn through about 30% of their budget in one episode of an eight-part thing, this is definitely the first one to watch, because it was quite impressive the amount of money one pair got burnt through. So I won't give any spoilers, but my son he couldn't believe it. He was like, how are they going to finish the race? And I was like, that's a good question.
Yeah, they're going to be working every day the rest of it for sure.
And then finally so I've watched Agent Argyle. I don't know if you're aware of this. This is a Matthew Vaughn, producer, director of Kingsmen, 3 or 4 films that we've had from him. It's in the same sort of universe, tangentially related. I don't know what to say. It's okay. It gets a bit silly in places. It's got a bit too much computer generated stuff happening for my liking. But on the whole, it was okay. It was quite a cool concept, but it was just very easy watching. And probably unlike me, I wouldn't go back and rush to watch it again. Whereas I do like to watch things repeatedly, as you know. It was okay. It was a good way to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours of my time. I quite enjoyed it, but I don't know, wasn't fantastic. But what I didn't appreciate was the main female actress is Ron Howard's daughter. So there you go. I didn't know that. But she was very good in it, I thought, to be fair. I enjoyed the cast. But I just get annoyed, I think, with some of the silliness in some of Matthew Vaughn's films.
So he's kick-ass as well, right?
Yes.
And I think Henry Cavill's in this.
Yeah, I was less taken with him.
I like Henry Cavill a lot. That he's superb as The Witcher, which again I'd recommend if you haven't seen the first season of The Witcher, at least go and watch that because it is terrific. And he's in an upcoming film with the actor that's in John Richardson, I think. I think he's more diverse than he's given the ability to be, Henry Cavill, but fair enough, he might not have the best part in this. And is that Bryce Dallas Howard that you're talking about that's in this as well, is it?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, she's a really good actress. She actually does some directing as well. She's directed a couple episodes of The Mandalorian and things like that. No, it's good cast. I probably will give it a go as well. It wasn't there when I looked at the weekend. The reason I sort of fell on Steve Martin was I brought up Napoleon and I sat looking at the credit for it, and I looked at the runtime and I thought, I can't face this. So I went and looked for something else.
It is off-putting, isn't it? That is a problem, I think. Agent Argyle, I think, was about 2 hours. But it was easy watching. It was something I just had on. I watched bits of it. I did some jobs while it was on. I just generally quite enjoyed it. But like I say, I find some of the Matthew Vaughn stuff just gets a bit silly in places. And that's not so much for me. Or there's too much CGI.
Fair enough. Anything else in media?
Nope.
Marvellous. Let's move on. I've got a little bit of games news. I bought a game over the weekend. I've had almost no time to play it because I was moving one of my children back to university. It's called Shadows of Doubt. It works beautifully on the Steam Deck. The text is a little bit small, but it says it's Windows, but no, it runs lovely on the Steam Deck. I think I got it for $11.99 on sale, and it's a detective simulator. It's got a very Minecraft sort of look to it. It's quite blocky and all the rest of it, But it's quite cool. Have you ever watched those detective shows where they've got cork boards and they've got things in red on them, and they make connections for the crime and all the rest of it? You can do that. You can break into people's apartments. You can go through their cupboards. You can find the evidence for their computers and things all within the world, and build up your evidence on your evidence board to make your accusations for people over time. It's sort of a bit cyberpunky, a bit Blade Runnery in the world. It's like a futuristic London, but everybody's got American accents. It's a British developer as well. Like I say, I'm going to give it a lot more time, but for the money it costs, for the look and the atmosphere it gives you, the fact that it works on your Steam Deck, and I haven't tried it on my Mac with Whiskey, but I'm really impressed with it so far. So I'm going to revisit the world again. But yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, do you know what? The pixely graphics look quite cool, especially with, I don't know how they've done the lighting on it, but the lighting looks amazing. So it does look quite a cool concept. Reminds me a bit of LA Noire, where you have to go and solve different crimes. It looks like a game that would be up my street, to be fair.
Yeah, I think you'd like it. You've got a Steam Deck, and you can cope with smaller text. Maybe worth picking up for 12 quid.
Yeah, it's a good price as well.
It's not bad at all. Second story, the Nintendo 3DS is dead. Oh, I don't know, did you have a 3DS in the house?
No, we are 2 Switches in our house and have been since whenever the Switch came out.
So 3DS was the follow-up to the Game Boy Color, I want to say. 2-screen, the early versions of them had a bit of...
Game Boy Advance Color, surely.
A Game Boy Advance Color, yeah. The 3DS was a split-screen device that you open up. It had 2 screens on it, one at the bottom, one at the top, with controllers around it. It had a light 3D effect on it as well. You could sort of dial in. I had 3 of them. I had one myself. My kids each had one, including one of the bigger ones. Largely to play Mario Kart on, and a little bit of Super Mario this and that. Perfectly good devices. We went on holiday. They folded away. They didn't take over the lives. You could have a quick game for an hour and a half on them. Great little thing. As with all Nintendo things, though, all modern Nintendo things, the cartridges for them were irritatingly small and easily lost, about the size of an SD card. And I think I bought Mario Kart 3 times because I kept losing it. So that was quite upsetting, because it's not cheap, Nintendo games. So yay, digital distribution of things are a good thing. But yeah, I feel a bit sad about them killing off the 3DS, but the Switch serves all of its purposes.
I'm amazed it's still going, if I'm honest, but it is a shame that older consoles are dying.
They very much are, but thankfully you can emulate them now on your iPhone.
The Game Boy Advance, and that's about it.
Although we did have the story about Nintendo suing Yuzu, the makers of the emulator for the Nintendo Switch, so maybe all isn't sunny in emulation land.
I'm amazed Nintendo's not getting in on it. Get in on it. Charge loads of money.
Yep, make your own iOS and Play App Store, sell ROMs for 60 quid a throw, off you go.
Done. Why wouldn't you do that?
Why wouldn't you do that? Madness. And the last story, and possibly the best story we've ever had on this podcast, Slay the Spire 2 has been pre-announced. It's going to go into early access in 2025. Slay the Spire is by far the game I've played more than any other game in my life, and I say that with an absolutely straight face, because I have spent a lot of time on things like Civilization and XCOM and maybe a bit of Call of Duty. But I was so excited to see Slay the Spire had been announced, and they've moved to a new game engine. And again, tangentially linked to this podcast, we talked about the Unity game development engine, which they changed the rights on, and lots of developers got very upset about the charging model that Unity were going to make developers absorb. Slay the Spire, or the developers of Slay the Spire, Megacrit, put their money where their mouth was throughout the fact that they'd had this multi-billion-dollar selling game built in Unity, and they're using the Godot open source engine for the development of Slay the Spire 2. Well done, Megacrit.
Yeah, that is good that they're voting with their feet, 100%.
Yep, so I'm excited about this, but it'll mean nothing to you.
Sorry, it just did not stick with me, dude.
Well, when they release 4s, then you'll be all over it.
3 squared.
9s.
9s maybe. I can't explain. I love that game. I play it out far too much. And like you, it's probably the game I've played the most in time ever, because it's been on my phone for so many years.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that can you spoil perfection, though? Are they going to bring out Slay the Spire 2 and it's going to taint Slay the Spire in the same way George Lucas killed my childhood by bringing out, The Phantom Menace? That's overly dramatic. I don't feel that bad about it anymore. I've forgiven George Lucas.
No, but if you've had such an amazing first album, or insert whatever you like here, it can be really hard to live up to the hype of the next game.
It can, but let's face it, the original game will still be the wonder that it is. or the album that it was, or the film that it was. And just because you get a bit disappointed by what comes next, hey, at least they had a go. They tried. It might have hit the heights of the first one, and maybe the third one will. You don't know. So I think they should always try. We shouldn't knock people for trying to do something new or sequels. And I think in the fullness of time, even George Lucas will be able to forgive for The Phantom Menace, but never for The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I think largely we're in agreement here. Yes.
Should we do a short main show?
Let's dive into the main show. So you put in a topic here, next generation devices.
Yeah, so last week we spent a lot of time talking about my move to Android, and it made me think about how dependent we are as a society on the mobile phone. And the mobile phone has become the dominant thing that we all must have in our hands, in our pockets, or in front of our eyes at any one point. Now, you're not going to die because you haven't got one. You know, you need food and air and water and shelter and all the things that you need to do. But in almost all other ways, to pay, to get parking, you know, to get your email, to, you know, to book theatre tickets, to do almost anything, to be in contact with people via a messenger, to get your tax from the government, a mobile phone is the way most people choose to do it. And that sort of reliance on that, it just made me wonder, are we potentially seeing the next generation of what comes after the mobile phone, if there's a what comes after the mobile phone? And we've talked about a couple of these devices in this podcast, and then I thought we'd throw the Apple Vision Pro in there as well. But for me, these next generation devices are powered by LLMs. We've talked about LLMs a lot. I've talked about my concerns and your concerns about how Apple and Microsoft and other companies and OpenAI are making use of them and the power of compute that they need. But they do potentially signal a change for things like the Rabbit AI, the Humane Pin, less the Apple Vision Pro. But those devices that you don't necessarily have to have an app for, or a screen for, or a SIM contract for. What you need is a device that can contact the LLM and it goes off and does it for you. So it was really that. Discuss, you know, what were your thoughts on that?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because are we going to have a device that replaces the mobile phone, you know, in, let's say, 20 years from now, which is ballpark how long the mobile phone's been prevalent. Pre-iPhone, you know, you had the BlackBerry run, you know, early 2000s-ish. Then you had the iPhone and proper smartphones from 2007 onwards. So 20 years from now, are we all going to be having slabs of glass or whatever material in our pockets? Or are we going to be wearing, you know, Google Glass like things? Or are we all going to have watches? Or are we just going to have a microphone embedded in us and we just speak and it goes off and does stuff? I don't know the answer. Some of these devices are interesting. I do like the idea of the Humane Pin. I think it's conceptually ambitious, and I quite like something like this. So it's a pin you clamp on. We've discussed it before. You can beam some text on your hand. You can communicate, ask it to do things for you. But that relies so much on AI. And if the AI isn't there yet, your functionality is limited. I like the concept of something like this because I would love to go out more often without my phone on me. And I try to do this with my Apple Watch, but every time I do, you realise you need something that's on your phone. And the phones are so prevalent in our lives, it's hard to do it because I'm going to want to go out and maybe I'm on my lunch break, but I need to be in contact for work purposes. So I need to set my phone for that. Or I want to take a photo of something, but I don't want to take my big camera. And so I need that. Or I want to be able to text my partner or look at the maps. You can't do these things so easily on other devices. And I do wonder whether the phone, whilst isn't perfect at everything, is good enough at 90% of things, and therefore it's going to be really hard to replace because it has eaten up the whole of what was. You remember TomTom, you know, having the sat nav for your car. Remember buying a camera, you know, a little compact camera that you take with you. They've gone. You used to buy a PDA. They've gone. You know, it's replaced enough devices into one. And so I do wonder, is there a world where we can fit other devices in? And are they replacement devices or are they additive devices? And for it to be replacement, it's got to do a lot of things pretty well, which I think in the short term, they're going to struggle. But then is there going to be something like the Humane Pin or this Rabbit AI device or the Vision Pro that can do really well if you buy it as well as your phone? And then maybe over time, you go to it for functions you would have used on your phone. So for me, I think the Humane Pin's interesting, but I just think there's too much for them to get up to speed with before it can become a replacement device. Same with the Rabbit AI piece. It's a very clever looking piece of kit. And I would love to have a go on some of these things, but I wonder how sticky they would be. You know, how much would you go to it. And the real test, like I say, like with the Apple Watch, can I leave my house? Because for Apple, that is kind of their Apple pin, isn't it? They've already got it, and they've got it on millions of people's wrists. Can they make it work like they could make it work like the pin easily? They could have it communicate, do AI. They could have it beam text. You can already use it to play music. You search, do things. So they've already got a pin-esque device, but not as ambitious as what the pin is trying to achieve. What do you think?
Right. There's a lot there.
Sorry.
The first thing is the pin is garbage. I've put a link into Mr. Who's the Boss's review of the Human AI pin in the show notes.
Oh, I don't think it's very good. I like the concept. Sorry, I should probably clarify.
No. I 100% agree. I see what you're going. That if you had a good version of the Human AI pin, I think there's something there. And it's interesting your argument about the Apple Watch being it. I don't think the Apple Watch is that, because it's very much a companion to a phone. For all they've tried to sort of split them a little bit at the moment, your watch is effectively useless without being able to sync to your phone at some point. And I know you can put a SIM card in it, and not that I ever have, but that experience is another cell contract. There isn't the power on the watch. It's so battery constrained. It's got to drive the screen. It's got to do all sorts of bits and pieces. But that's kind of getting lost down a rat hole that I don't think matters at this point. Apple could build a better Humane pin. Of course they could. Google could build a better Humane pin. And I think the better thing is actually the Rabbit AI, where you're devolving a lot of the features from the product into the LLM, and a knowledgeable LLM that's able to have a bit more power. So it can go off to Spotify and find your music, or it could book you the concert tickets and sit in the queue for your Taylor Swift tickets and get them when they became available for you. And that's stickier, isn't it? If you could say to your assistant, let me know when this call comes through and I'm out of the office, and it can do that for you, only that call, because it's the only one you're interested in, then that's a bit stickier. Or let me know the second that you've bought the Taylor Swift tickets for me at $4,000 a pop, or whatever it is, and it does that for you, and that's quite transformative. You roll up into the car park and you say, just book me 3 hours parking at the space, and you walk out, and that device, be it a pen, be it a cool pair of glasses or whatever, are doing it for you, and you're not having that interaction of take it in my pocket, get it to authenticate my device, my eye or my finger or whatever it is, click on the thing, tap on the thing, hit pay here, do this there. I think it's the process that's transformative as much as the device. And the Humane pin had the promise of doing that, but the execution is so abysmal that, and again, watch the Mr. Who's the Boss video. It's quite long. It's about 25 minutes. He gives it a fair crack of the whip. Simple things like call such and such would take 5 to 6 seconds. It was long enough that actually in the marketing for Humane AI, they talk over the bit where the pen is thinking about going off to do something, which is why I think the Rabbit thing is more interesting. And an iteration of the Vision Pro or something like it could be interesting. If the Vision Pro was contact lenses, where you could, integrate with an LLM like that and say, go and do this, and it just gives you a readout at some point, and maybe we're talking 30 years or 40 years. What I wanted to sort of get over was, is this the beginning of the next wave? Is these AI LLM devices as a conduit rather than the screen being the conduit? And I don't think we're there yet. I think we're probably 20 years at least from that. But is this the sort of hint of the next wave of things coming at us?
Do you not think, though, that what you're describing, the phone's going to end up doing, and it will just carry on being the phone? That's kind of, I guess, where my head is, rightly or wrongly, that's where my head is at the moment, that we're just going to end up with these devices being on the periphery, but the phone's just going to eat their lunch, in essence.
I think the phone is hard to bet against. I 100% agree. People love their phones. They don't mind doom scrolling Facebook forever or Mastodon or Twitter or whatever it is. They don't mind sort of brainlessly clicking through Instagram to look at these things. They actively enjoy it. So I don't disagree. I think it is going to be the hub for many years to come. I wonder if we're at the edges of, maybe that does remain at the center of it, but if you could palm a lot of this stuff on people while still giving them the dopamine hit of being able to scroll through their Instagram or their Snapchats or whatever with some sort of display, that might not be the way that it goes. And what really made me think about this was Johnny Ive has gone in with Sam Altman of OpenAI looking for $1 billion in funding to make a device. So obviously the OpenAI people see there's something in this, the post-phone device. And maybe the post-phone device is just a better phone, I don't know. Maybe it's Samsung, instead of a foldable phone, it's one you can just scrunch up and stick in your pocket, and it springs out to map size when you need it. I don't know. But it's interesting to entertain the notion that it doesn't have to be a phone anymore. It can be something like just a one-screen device that isn't a phone, that expressly isn't a phone in the case of the Rabbit device, or beam something onto your hand. And really, I think that lets it down the screen on the Humane pin. It should be entirely, they should have enough confidence in the device that it's entirely voice only. Or as a companion app for your phone. But I just wonder, are we seeing that? And I don't, regular listeners of the podcast will know I'm not a huge believer in the LLMs as they stand at the moment, but they represent an evolutionary point, I think, where we're going to get something better, something that can do side lookups to other databases and is a bit more clever. It's just making me think about where we stand in technology at the moment.
No, I think we are an interesting point. I just wonder whether the phone is going to morph into what you're talking about. And it kind of reminds me when they introduced the first iPhone, and like it's all screen, there's no keyboard kind of thing, because it will adapt to what you need. And that's kind of where we're potentially going with this, is that it will continue to evolve, and you'll interrogate your LLMs, your iterations of AI, and it will be more than just LLMs, I think, as we go on. You'll just interrogate it in different guises through your phone. That's my probably short-termist view. I just think because the phone's so good at so many things, like you said, as you opened up, we're using it to pay. I went into town today, I paid for my car parking, I bought a book, I bought my coffee with it, I got my points on my points card in the bookshop, I then did some work on it, I kept in contact with my colleagues, I text my son to let him know what time I'll be home. You can do all that on that device. I think it's going to be hard for somebody to do all of that functionality on a new device and have other people support it, because you need the wallet capability, you need the car parking apps, you need the get your points capability, text messaging, and that would be my concern there. That is there too much to spawn a new device like this and then get the mass adoption to actually make it work, whereas the phones, whether it's Android or iOS, have largely got all the apps on the same now. And you may want to cover this next week when we catch up on your Android experience, but it feels to me as an outsider to Android that the iPhone and the Android developer estate has probably got parity on apps now. Most places you go, you see two icons, and you're not one or the other. That's how it feels, and so I just worry that there's not enough space for a third device, a new category device to come in and to sit alongside iPhones or a phone until it gains market share to then become big enough to then be replaced, if that makes sense. I just think the ask of a replacement phone device is a lot bigger than what it was 15 years ago.
I mostly agree with you. I mean, it's a hypothetical question I'm posing here. It's are we seeing the next wave of technology? And I wonder if we're just beginning to see
some exciting tech product, like some exciting tech demos, I guess.
I think we are, but it has the potential to be really transformative. And I absolutely agree with you that what it will probably be is just a really clever app on your phone. And the device manufacturers, be they Google or be they Apple, build the LLMs into the phone to such an extent that you're able to do all those things on it. But it's quite cool just to think for a minute about what else could be. Is there a potential competitor to the phone ever? Is this it? If we hit peak technology for the human race, it's going to be a slab of glass, plastic, polymer, diamond that we carry around either embedded in our eyeballs or in our phone that is in our pocket that is effectively a phone from this point forward. Surely there's something else there. And I don't know that there is, but it's interesting to entertain the notion that we're not science fiction writers here, but it is... LLMs have really caught the imagination, even though they're not sticky, like you say, for work purposes. But maybe they're just waiting to find their niche a little bit, or whatever the next generation of LLM is that is more power efficient, that can do more on device, that can be embedded in your eyeball if you're willing to let it do that. It's an inflection point for me, I think, is that this has really caught the public's imagination in a way I haven't seen, because an iPad's just a big phone. A phone is just a more portable computer. This is an inflection point in the same way that the iPhone was. It changed the mobile phone industry. I think there's something in these models. It's just a beginning, a very small beginning, but we're not at the end of it yet, and I'm really just curious to see where it goes.
No, I agree with you. I think we're largely in a similar sort of place. I think we need to see the evolutions of the LLMs in the next iterations. We need Apple to enter the game because they're not even they're not even on the fringes at the moment. They've just been watching from the sidelines, I guess. So that's going to be interesting. And I think we've talked a little bit about the M4 chips. They're potentially going to have some AI capabilities, and we're going to see more of that, I think. So I think we need to see a bit more, and I think we're probably 12 to 18 months, maybe a bit longer, from seeing the next advancement where it maybe is a lot more prolific, whereas at the moment it's just a lot of talking around. It's been a marketing campaign, hasn't it, around AI, whereas I think we're actually maybe a little bit more evolution and maturity, and then it'll actually become more useful. And I think that's 12 to 18 months, maybe a bit longer.
If I can't play Slay the Spire on my Humane AI Pen 2, I've got no interest in it anyway. No, I think that's a useful discussion, though. That's a useful discussion, and you're right. Let's keep an eye, and let's see what happens after WWDC.
Yeah, that will be super interesting. Then you've got two giants declaring their hands for the short term, haven't you?
Definitely. I think we can. No, we can't call that a show because we haven't done App of the Week. Oh gosh, slap my wrist. I think we can call that a main show, and let's move on into App of the Week.
Let's do it.
I'm gonna recommend a Google Play app because that's the sort of ecosystem I've been looking at, and it didn't say it had to be an iOS App of the Week, did it?
That's fair. So it
So
makes sense in the current climate.
It does. My recommendation is an app called Series Guide. It's very analogous to an app called Sequel 2 that I recommended for iOS, which is a ability to look up and coming shows or episodes of a series that you may be interested in, or movies that are coming or something like that. It serves the same sort of purpose. If you're interested in, say, for example, Star Trek Discovery, you put in Star Trek Discovery, it'll tell you there's a season ongoing at the moment, it'll tell you when the next episode is, you can mark things as watched. It tells you when Taskmaster's on again next in the UK. It's that kind of app that'll sort of forecast what's coming and at 9 o'clock tonight on BBC Two, it's going to be this. And that kind of stuff is really helpful, and I was worried there weren't going to be that sort of rich depth of apps, particularly that work in the UK, that you'd get on iOS, and I found something good enough. It's not as good, it's not as polished as SQL, but it does the basics very, very well. So that's my App of the Week, Series Guide.
Yeah, it looks nice. I do like some of the design aesthetic of the Android OS and apps. I don't know if it's just because it's different, and sometimes I crave different, but it looks really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on it last week. The widgets on Android are so much more powerful than they are on iOS. That I can't. Well, I could show you, but it's not going to be very good radio. The app for this particular thing, widgets are automatically dynamic, so you can actually. It won't work because I'm doing it in reverse. You can drag on them and you can actually expand them to the size you want them to be on the screen. So you can have like a 2x2 grid for them, or 4x4 it'll default to and give you some recommendations. But you can actually make them as big as small as you want on the screen once you embed them. And this one, you then get a scrolling list within it. And again, I can't do it. You can do it a little bit to see what's going on and what's upcoming next within the thing. And they're just very powerful. If you click on it, it'll open the app the same as it would with that. The podcast app, for example, you can just tap on the widget and it will skip forward 30 or skip backwards and forwards. You can control it. You can control the volume directly off it. They're just far more customizable, and that aspect of the operating system is absolutely nailed compared to iOS.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. We are missing some of that interaction and dynamicness. They're very cautious when they add this functionality, I think. I guess because it's such a big market that they're addressing it to, but Android's not exactly a small market, and yet they're getting this functionality.
Yep. And just while you're on the link looking at Series Guide, for those of you that click it on the show notes, I don't know what it looks like for you, Chris, but for me, because I'm logged into my Google account, it knows what devices have installed this on, and I can install it on my phone from the website.
That's quite cool.
Which is mind blowing. So if I had an Android tablet as well, it would appear, click install it on this device too, and it'll just download and install it from there. And that is just a nice little bit of functionality that shows Google's really deep roots with the web. But actually, why don't apps work like that?
Yeah, that's quite cool, because sometimes you're like, I'll install that when I get back to my device, or I've got to take my other device out. It would be great to go, just pop this over there, please. Thank you very much. So I just get an install button, and if I click it, it asks me to sign in.
Yeah, well, there you go. So there you go. That's my app of the week. Have you got a thing of the week?
I have a thing of the week, and it's an Amazon link to something I bought, and it's the least exciting thing in the world. It is 3 small metal brackets with some rubber on them, and these are ideal to hold your laptop or your Mac under your desk. And I bought them because I was getting cheesed off with my Mac Mini, and I thought, you know what, a quality of life improvement will be to properly put my Mac Mini somewhere. I've got a standing desk that goes up and down, and so you want the Mac to go up and down with it so you don't stretch any cables or pull anything out or do any damage. For £15 in the UK, this is perfect, and it's actually quite a nice quality because you never know when you order something like this, is it going to be all right? And it's perfect. It does what it says on the tin. A couple of screws in the bottom of the desk, and off we go. So not exciting, but my desk looks a load cleaner, and I just thought this is something I should share with people. And I kind of like the idea that if maybe I didn't have a Mac in the future, but I could always use the brackets again to put a laptop in, because that would be kind of cool if you had a Mac that you use, but you maybe use it with the screen, you're using clamshell mode. You could just stick it under the desk, plug the cable in, and then it's not taking up desk real estate. So I just thought that was a cool idea, and not a lot of money.
It's interesting. The laptop, where do the cables go? Because in the picture, it's sort of all clamped there nicely. The MacBook Air is clamped nicely, but I'm looking at my MacBook Pro and I'm thinking, hang on, I've got two, USB-C cables sticking out the side. And
well, I guess you would. You'd probably pull it in rear face. If you had it at the front underneath the desk, you'd probably pull it in so the back of the device is facing you, so you can just push the cables in, and then you use your keyboard and your mouse, and off you go. I only have one cable that I use on my laptop with my screen because it goes into a dock or a monitor that's got USB-C or Thunderbolt, which is what I do with my iPad. I think it's kind of cool. I've not tried it on a laptop. Like I said, I'm just using my Mac Mini, which doesn't move, but it's just cleared up my desk lovely. So dead chuffed.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense for a Mac Studio or a Mac Mini or something like that. I totally get that. Laptop, I think, stand by the side of the desk, because the idea is you're going to pick it up and go with it, and I wouldn't want to be reaching under my desk or guddling around under my desk, plugging and unplugging cables. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a small thing, but like I say, quality of life improvement, massive tick.
Cool. I think we can call it a show, Chris.
Yes, I think so. So thanks everybody for listening, and if you want to get in contact with us, you can contact Rod on Mastodon. He's at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch us on YouTube. If you go to wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link, drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.